What's up, everybody? Welcome back to my channel. I am Shelby Nave, and today we are back for the second half of the Lai Massacre story. This is pretty much gonna pick up right where it left off. So if you haven't seen part 1, go ahead, hit pause, jump over there, watch part 1, because you're gonna be completely lost for part 2 without part 1. Then come back and watch this one, because we're finally going to get to know the results of all the war crimes that happened at My Lai. So without further ado, let's get into it.
The next part of the story I like to call the sabotage of the trials, and it is very much how it sounds. Many people were involved in this sabotage, but it was driven mostly by our very own President Richard Nixon. The last thing he wanted was for any American soldier to be convicted of a war crime, especially under his watch. He cringed at the thought of the history books recording that the US military, or at least a small element of it, had stooped to the level of the Nazis or the sociopathic killers of Stalin's Russian army. Well, you can't just pretend it didn't happen. Yeah, you may cringe about it, but you still have to deal with it. Okay, here are your players. First off, President Nixon, Lai Massacre, a key congressional tie who pushed the propaganda operation. He would later write in his own autobiography that his job involved attacking and discrediting people and legislation that ran counter to the president's will. And lastly, Congressman Mendel Rivers, chairman of the House of Armed Services Committee and U.S. representative. Rivers was in the business of supporting the best interests of the U.S. military and promoting their image as honorable, effective fighting men. He was adamantly opposed to the prosecution of any U.S. soldier for what happened at My Lai. Oh, and actually one last really important player was Lieutenant General William Pierce, who was given the task to make a thorough, truthful report of what happened at My Lai. Not everyone was happy about Pierce getting appointed to do this task, mainly just out of fear of what he would actually uncover. Congressman Williams and his friend, Congressman Edward Hebert, they were in the business for making the military not look bad at all costs.
Rivers and Herbert created a subcommittee of their own to investigate the alleged massacre at My Lai. They argued that their committee, being that it was separate from the military, would be better equipped to dig deep into the investigation and uncover the truth, when in reality, they were in the business of making the charges go away. Everyone in the committee shared like-minded and very pro-military views, leading many to believe that the committee wouldn't actually investigate truthfully. However, this committee had a lot of power because of its ability to subpoena witnesses and hear secret testimonies, a power which Secretary of the Army Stanley Resser expressed many concerns about because he didn't like the idea of people in Congress tangling their hands into the investigation that he believed was the Army's business to deal with. However, that didn't stop Nixon and his political players from interfering with the investigation.
Rivers, specifically, did everything possible, ethical or not, to prevent the conviction of any of the ground troops who were there that day. Why? I seriously just do not understand why these men are hanging on so hard to the idea of not wanting to tarnish the military uniform. It's already tarnished. By keeping soldiers who have broken the law and also just broken the basic ethics towards humanity in a U.S. military uniform is the true disgrace. They couldn't accept the idea of anyone accusing the US military of a massacre. It was just unacceptable in their minds. Yeah, well, it's kind of unacceptable in my mind too. However, maybe we should stop pretending that it didn't happen and actually take action to bring justice since it happened. I mean, the situation is never going to be made right. There's no way to make up for the deaths of 500 civilians. But not bringing any justice is what actually tarnished what America is supposed to be all about. Because there's no honor in a lie. Nixon and his team pretty much did whatever means necessary to just completely whitewash the situation that happened in My Lai, discredit anyone who said otherwise, and even criminalize Thompson. Anytime that Thompson testified, they tried to take anything he said out of context and turn it back around on him, mostly just to make him appear like the guilty one. And they're calling him a traitor. I understand they think that he turned against his troops and was helping the enemy, but that's not what happened because the enemy wasn't actually the enemy. At least they weren't. Some people actually view Cali as a hero.
Thompson's eyewitness account gave a lot of weight to the allegations at hand. Therefore, Nixon, through the help of Rivers and Herbert, honed in on discrediting Hugh Thompson as a witness, soldier, and American. Nixon authorized the use of dirty tricks, as he called them, to get the results that he wanted by however means necessary, even if those tactics are beyond what most would consider to be fair play. One of these dirty tricks was used in the court-martial of Sergeant David Mitchell. Political players blocked Thompson and 3 other prosecution witnesses from testifying against Mitchell until their previous statements taken by Rivers' subcommittee were released. However, the subcommittee refused to release the statements, and used the Jenks Act to withhold the information of numerous witnesses, which caused Mitchell's case to collapse and he was let go.
Many men involved in the My Lai massacre were charged with various crimes, and Cali's case was first because he was about to be discharged from the military, and once that happened, the army no longer had jurisdiction to prosecute him. So it was really important to act fast, especially since Cali was the one responsible for the most deaths that happened that day. He was only charged with premeditated murder, which it's important to note that he wasn't charged for everything he actually did that day. That was his only charge. But nonetheless, after a very messy amount of trials, he was convicted of murder and received a life sentence. Great! At least we got justice for putting Cali away, right? Not exactly. Cali's conviction caused one of the biggest public outcries I think I've ever read about in history.
My name is William Cali. I'm a soldier of this land. I've tried to do my duty and to gain the upper hand. But fate made me out a villain. They have tanked me with a brand as we go marching home.
There were protests, and military personnel were like turning in their medals. People were writing songs about him. They were making bumper stickers about him. There was so much support for freeing Cali, and there was so much outrage from people saying that he was a scapegoat and was just following orders. Numerous letters were written to Nixon saying that he needed to take action to free Cali. Dear President Nixon, the Lieutenant Cali trial and conviction is a colossal miscarriage of justice and should never have taken place. Stop any more of this and grant Lieutenant Cali full pardon with honors for doing his duty to his country and protecting his men. This is the only crime he committed, and we need more men like him. Mr. President, this is the only crime he committed. He only did it once. This person was openly admitting that not only did a crime occur, but Cali was responsible for it. And let me just say, one time of blatantly murdering someone is already far too many times.
There were so many pleas for mercy for one of the men who showed absolutely no mercy for the women, children, and old men who begged for their lives 3 years earlier at an irrigation ditch in My Lai.
And other people were saying that there was no way that he could have known the difference between the Viet Cong and the civilians. And I'm sorry, anyone with eyeballs could have been able to figure that out. This baby, yeah, he really looks like Viet Cong to me. And don't get me wrong, I feel like there are going to be people who clap back at me on this situation, because I'm aware in the Vietnam War that there were many Vietnamese people who looked like civilians who were sympathizers, who would do crazy things like strap bombs to their kids and send their kids running into the Americans. They did all sorts of crazy things that, of course, made US soldiers not trust anyone. And since a lot of these sympathizers did look just like everybody else, I could understand why it would be hard to differentiate the two. However, I feel like upon just the first couple of minutes of being in the village of My Lai, people should have started to notice that these people are not fighting back, that they don't have any weapons, and they're all not within the demographic of who was in the Viet Cong.
Also, not knowing who was or wasn't a part of the Viet Cong doesn't justify things like the rape and torture that also happened there.
In response, President Nixon actually stepped in as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces in the United States and released Cali from the stockade and put him on house arrest pending the appeal of his conviction. In the end, Cali served approximately 4 months, even though he was given a life sentence. We let him go.
By the end of the investigation and trials, all those accused were let go, including Captain Ernest Medina, who they knew had lied about what he had seen in My Lai.
Did you yourself, Captain, actually see the shooting of old men or women or children?
No, I did not.
You saw none?
I saw no shooting of any innocent civilians whatsoever.
As well as Paul Meadlow, who even confessed about his actions in an interview with CBS News.
I might have killed about 10, 15 of them.
Men, women, and children?
Men, women, and children.
Why did you do it?
Because I felt like I was ordered to do it. Well, at the time, I felt like I was doing the right thing.
And let me remind you, Cali was one of 20-something people who were recommended to be court-martialed and charged with war crimes, and he was the only one to be convicted of anything. Everyone else was either dismissed or acquitted, but now we're letting Cali go, who had already gotten a life sentence for murder. Murder, maiming, assault, rape, scalping, torture, dereliction of duty, failure to report a war crime, cover-up, perjury. All of these things were unpunished. The prosecutor in Cali's case, his name was Captain Aubrey Daniel III. After President Nixon intervened in the trial, Aubrey Daniel actually sent a letter to Nixon, pretty much telling him exactly what was on his mind about the situation. I'm just going to read you the very last part of it because I think it's pretty telling. The greatest tragedy of all will be if political expediency dictates the compromise of such a fundamental moral principle as the inherent unlawfulness of the murder of innocent persons, making the action and the courage of 6 honorable men who served their country so well meaningless. And unfortunately, that's kind of where it was left. Every man who participated in the killing of civilians that day was able to walk free.
History shows that Nixon's presidency was far from honorable in more ways than one, but his refusal to prosecute war criminals for the sake of preserving the image of the United States military violates the Geneva Conventions, a promise that the US would prosecute its own war criminals, as other countries have promised to prosecute theirs. Because of Nixon's decision to interfere with the judicial system, American history books will never record how our country had multiple convicted war criminals from the incident in My Lai.
But the annoying stress didn't end there. As time went on, it kind of seemed like Thompson tried as much as possible to disassociate himself with Vietnam and the incident at My Lai. In the eyes of some, he was viewed as a traitor. You know, he was moved around quite a bit after returning from the war, and some people knew who he was and some people didn't. But a person who greatly admired what Thompson did in My Lai was David Egan, a Clemson University professor of architecture who was destined to play a major role in Thompson's return from obscurity. It was basically a quest for Egan to get Thompson the Soldier's Medal. This medal was the highest honor for non-combative efforts. Over the course of 8 years, he wrote letters upon letters upon letters, making his case of why Hugh Thompson deserved to have the Soldier's Medal. He recruited colleagues, people in the military, people in Congress. He recruited all of these people to help support his task in getting Thompson that medal. And it was really frustrating because once the award had been approved, it seemed like the government and the Pentagon still continued to drag their feet on the situation. He was getting this reward nearly 3 decades after My Lai. So the military didn't want to bring up that old story, bring light to it again and attention to it again. And not only did it take forever for them to approve the award for Thompson, but once they did approve it, they just continued to drag their feet and slow the process with things like just where it would be, to which more and more people were writing in to say, stop pushing this off, stop prolonging this period. One person even wrote into them saying, like, it's not gonna look too good if this soldier still hasn't gotten his award a year and a half after he was approved for it. And Thompson made it pretty clear from the start what he wanted for this ceremony. He wanted it to be open to the public, open to the press, at the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., and he also wanted his crew members, Larry Colburn and Glenn Andreatta, to also be receiving the award as well. The first time that the Pentagon reached out for their formal confirmation of the award ceremony for this, they said that it was gonna be a private event somewhere that wasn't the Vietnam Memorial, and mentioned nothing about his crew members also getting the award. This, of course, didn't fly for Thompson. And again, it just went back into the whole foot dragging situation. Finally, Thompson and his men were awarded the Soldier's Medal for their acts of bravery in saving civilians in the massacre at My Lai in Vietnam.
I'm proudly and humbly accept it, not only for myself, but for all the men who served their country with honor on the battlefields of Southeast Asia.
In addition to the Vietnamese lives saved as a result of the stoppage of Task Force Barker, many more lives have been saved around the world as an indirect result of the action of the 3 heroes at My Lai. Their good deed has provided an example for other servicemen to follow. Their story is used in US and European military ethics manuals as an example of the proper treatment of civilians in wartime. Their story also demonstrates the soldier's obligation to disobey illegal orders, a responsibility that was anything but clear in the minds of many of the US troops in My Lai. Thus, it can be said with certainty that the actions of Thompson and his crew resulted in the saving of not only 9 or 10 lives, but ultimately many more.
Elderly woman walked toward us. She said that she had been dumped in the ditch back in 1968, but had survived, shielded by the bodies of the dead and dying.
And he wants to meet the Thompson, a good man.
She wants to meet Mr. Thompson. Well, here is Mr. Thompson.
Very, very glad
Hello,
to
ma'am.
meet you.
Nice to meet you. Sorry we couldn't help you that day. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Why, she wanted to know, were so many villagers killed that day? And why was Thompson different from the rest of the Americans?
I saved the people because I wouldn't talk to murder and kill. I can't answer for the people who took part in it. I apologize for the ones who did. I just wish we could have helped more people that day.
There's a big difference between killing in war and murder, cold-blooded murder.
I don't know, has the United States ever apologized? Or are we too big to apologize? It happened. The United States knows it happened. You can't go forward till you get it out of reverse.
Many believe that he saved the honor for his country. And in 2000, he was actually nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Him and Larry Colburn were asked to speak numerous times after being awarded the award, because a lot of the times people genuinely did not know of his actions whatsoever until many, many years later. And once his actions were made public, an example was made out of him. He was finally getting the recognition that a military vet who did the right thing deserves.
All three forgotten heroes of My Lai received the Soldier's Medal in 1998. 30 years after the massacre. Glenn Andreatta received his posthumously, as he was killed shortly after the My Lai incident in 1968 at the age of 20. Larry Colburn received his medal alongside Thompson and joined him in numerous opportunities to speak about his My Lai experiences and military ethics. He died of cancer in 2016 at the age of 67. Hugh Thompson received the Soldier's Medal after years of being ostracized by the American government and public for his involvement in the massacre. However, his actions have gone on to become a prominent lesson of war ethics taught in the military. He died of cancer in 2006 at the age of 62. To this day, many Americans have no idea what happened at the village of My Lai, nor do they know about the three forgotten heroes who intervened and tried to stop it.
Honestly, the thing about it the most that breaks my heart is that not only was he made out to be the criminal, but just that he for so long was not awarded, and he was more harassed for doing the right thing. And for just having empathy for people and just not following orders. I still think the My Lai massacre still doesn't get enough attention as I think it probably should have. Being someone who is as into history as I was, especially in high school, I don't know why it wasn't until my adult life, until I figured out who Hugh Thompson even was at all and what he did and what that meant for America. It just blows my mind that the US is so concerned about how we look and not looking bad, that we're willing to lie about it to preserve the idea of the American military when it's just false. Like the fact that our government has the power to erase things from our history, not even just from the outside world, but from us, from the citizens who make up this country, that I feel like should be an outrage to a lot of people. To me, honor is such it's everything. It's everything in the military, I feel like. Like, we expect our military people to act honorably. And as much as it's great to see these people who did that, it is also just as disheartening on the flip side to see the people who do not. And not only do not do it, but cover up any wrongdoings, which is even more dishonorable. But I hope you received a better understanding of at least part of the Vietnam War and this very crucial incident that happened in it. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, definitely give me a thumbs up down below and let me know what you think. Like, what do you agree with? What do you not agree with? As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you the next time I upload a new video.